Nice. Although, not sure if it'll make me feel... Why can't I have that? I know, I'm making this video way later than I would have liked to, but with how long the GVH review video was and how long it took to put together and how it came out right next to Wani, I just needed a break from long-form videos. But I'm ready, I'm here now, and today I'm going to talk to you all about Dino Girls for another 30 to 40 minutes. I need help. But before I do that, let's talk about today's sponsor. No, I'm just kidding. Anyways, let's get to it. So, to give a little bit of background before we begin, I Wani Hug That Gator, or Wani for short, as some people say, is a Ren'Py visual novel that is developed by Caveman on, the same developers that made Snoot Game and the upcoming Exit 665. Wow, I actually forgot that was a thing. But unlike Snoot Game, which is a parody of Goodbye Volcano High, I Wani Hug That Gator is an original game with completely new characters. Well, kinda. And it also takes place in the same universe as Snoot Game, as well as the same setting, Volcadera Bluffs. I don't care if I'm gonna mispronounce it. There are a few references to Snoot Game too, but nothing too direct, but I'll get to that in a bit. And there are a few of the characters, namely Olivia, Liz, and Mia, that originally started as fan characters for Snoot Game, and they eventually made their way over into this game. And so when I first saw the reveal of Wani, I was excited as hell. Especially with how much I love Snoot Game, I was eager to see what the developers would come up with next. Although there was parts of me that doubted whether or not it would be as good, or if it would falter, especially when stacking it up against Snoot Game, a game that impacted me on an emotional level that few games have been able to do. But how does Wani stack up? Is it worse? Is it better? Honestly, I'd say it's pretty damn good. Now personally, I wouldn't say it really impacted me on the same level that Snoot Game did emotionally, but that could be more of a me problem than anything else, although Wani definitely didn't disappoint for the most part. So now let's talk about the story. That's where I'm gonna start this off first. So I Wani Hug That Gator puts you in the fresh designer clothes of Inco, a human male that just moved to Volcadera Bluffs and is starting his senior year at St. Hammond's and... Wait, this all sounds really familiar. Haven't I seen this before? Anyways, Inco has a pretty intense first day where he's surrounded by dino students and they're all touching him like that one scene in Game of Thrones where all of the people are touching Daenerys because she's... And next, he almost gets flattened by one of the mod characters from Pizza Tower, and later he tries to parry a dodgeball with his face and ends up getting sent home early. Turns out one's face isn't a viable parry tool. He should have had golden parry equipped. But in his first couple of days, he meets quite a new faces. Damien, an absolute bro that combines the attributes of Nasser and Reed from Snoot Game and puts them into one big lovable himbo. And then we have Ben, one of the school's top students and Inco's first real friend. Kinda. And a fellow photographer. He has a great eye for photos, but not so much a great eye for girlfriends, it seems. Speaking of, we have Mia, everyone's favorite dummy mom, a sadistic bully that delights in tormenting those around her because she's just evil, okay? That's why. And then we have Liz who, wow, God, that's a long neck. I wonder if that means she has no gag reflex. Moving on. Not to mention Yadakin. Yadakin? Yeah, the pterodactyl art/photography teacher that serves as the mentor figure to Inco and Olivia, similarly to Principal Spears. And of course, we have the Gator herself, Olivia, an introverted yet passionate paraplegic baryonyx with a love of painting and the arts. Passionate paraplegic baryonyx is not a sentence I would expect to use a couple years back, but we're rolling with it. Both her and Inco find each other interacting more and more with each other as the story progresses, as their initial awkwardness with each other eventually moves on to friendship as Inco joins her friend group, and the two eventually fall for each other. Now, before I dive too much into what I think of the characters, I want to talk about the story first, like I said. As I was saying, as the game progresses, Inco grows closer to Olivia, befriending her, her friends, and her adoptive family to the point where he becomes a regular guest at Damien's house, who also treat him better than his actual parents too, if I might add. As well as stepping out of his comfort zone from visiting the arcade with his new friends, going out to eat at a... Wait, is that the fucking Skylon Tower? The CN Tower? And you also get some really nice moments where Inco helps Eotikin photographs his friend's wedding while struggling with his growing feelings for Olivia. Oh, and also, did I mention that Eotikin's friend in question just so happens to be the motherfucking taxi driver from Snoot Game? Yup, the Dino Monarch is back and he's marrying Dr. Girlfriend, except she doesn't have the deep voice. But it's all good, it was still nice to see. However, it's not all sunshine and rainbows as Inco and Olivia find themselves constantly being harassed by Mia, a totally original character who... just thinking about her makes me angry. Anyways, the two have to deal with Mia bullying Olivia as well as blackmailing her into making work for Mia and her friends, causing Olivia to work herself to the point of damaging her own well-being. Causing Olivia to overwork herself to the point of damaging her health. And later, around the half point of the game, they sadly have to deal with the untimely death of Mr. Eotikin. The loss of their mentor, however, brings the two even closer together, to the point where they finally confess their feelings for each other. And similarly to Snoot Game, your choices in Wani also impact the way Inco and Olivia grow as people throughout the game. Like how Inco has the chance to become less self-absorbed and more mature, and how Olivia becomes less prideful and manages to overcome her rut and the grief she feels from Eotikin's death. So, I want to talk about how these choices impact by discussing the ending. So, I'm sorry to remind some of you guys the pain caused by this ending, but we're going to be starting with ending 1. So, depending on your choices and if you get ending 1, Olivia becomes more bitter and hostile to the point where she lashes out at her adopted family, particularly Vinny, who just wanted to make sure his big sister was okay. Somebody give this kid a hug. And Inco becomes more egotistical and self-absorbed to the point where he cancels his original date idea with Olivia to go see a meet and greet with an e-celeb he likes. He pressures Olivia into attending the winter formal with him despite her lack of interest in going, and oh, it gets better as well. After her outfit gets ruined, Inco pushes her into wearing a pretty skimpy outfit knowing she's supposed to give a speech in front of all the attendees, completely unprepared too. And he takes a photo of Olivia in her moments of grief and despair, more concerned about the artistic value of the shot rather than his girlfriend's pain, tries to push all the blame onto Olivia, and then forces her into a hug, which causes her to fall down the stairs, sending her to the hospital, and avoiding any responsibility, not even trying to save Guts when he's treated like vermin by the hospital staff, and fucking leaves him to fend for himself when he gets thrown outside. Like, fuck, you thought Anon was bad in ending 1 of Snoot Game? Inco's something else in this chapter, that's for sure. And I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really like this ending as much as some of the others. Like, this is probably my least favorite ending. I mean, not necessarily because it's shocking, because it's definitely shocking. Not as shocking as Snoot Game ending 1, and that was my favorite ending, unpopular opinion. But definitely more so shocking in a realistic manner, quote-unquote. But my main issue was how quickly Inco changed into the uncaring, narcissistic asshole that he is, especially considering with how he's portrayed for most of Wani until the path divergence. Like, it felt a bit unnatural and way too quick in my opinion. And now, let's discuss ending 2. Now, ending 2, I found it did a really good job into tricking you that you've got the good ending. Olivia manages to overcome her rut and devotes herself to practicing her art while preparing for the winter formal. Inco and Olivia's date in this ending is significantly better. They visit an art gallery where many of Eotikin's paintings were displayed, helping her gain some inspiration and a foot in the door with the art industry. However, I noticed there were some subtle clues that hinted that this wasn't going to be the good ending. Like how Olivia is still very prideful in a lot of ways, focusing on her work and success rather than anything else, or how she adamantly refuses to cooperate with anyone that tries to point out her disability in regards to her own art. And Inco, in terms of how he still shows a bit of naivete, self-absorption, know-it-all. Basically, he still kind of has his head up his ass, particularly where he lectures the Payne family about eating sashimi when they're just trying to enjoy a fucking meal without a Redditor getting on their case. And things seem like they're going well at prom, that is until Olivia gives her speech about Eotikin and her choice of words being, well, a bit blunt, and it ends with Olivia being booed off stage, and Inco finds Olivia outside where the two have a big argument, causing them to break up, only for them to get back together 3 weeks later. And then the game cuts 3 years later where they're still together, but Olivia's art career is struggling to take off, and she still remains too stubborn and prideful to her own detriment, and Inco is, well, a simp. And the two get into another argument with Inco just realizing how unhappy they are together, and the game ends where he's worried about his future with Olivia. This is a sad ending, but I really like the way it was written, especially with how at the start of it, it tricks you into thinking this is the good ending, like things seem like they're going well at first. And I like how the ending was written because it shows the truth that while some relationships can be saved, it doesn't always mean that they should be, or how in Inco's case, some people are more afraid of being alone than they are with being stuck in an unhappy relationship. It's a very bitter truth that I thought Caveman On did a great job with portraying. And then we have ending 3, which is probably my personal favorite ending. Similarly to ending 1, Olivia is still struggling with her rut and her depression. However, she's far more kinder and a lot less bitter in this route, and still manages to have a good time with Inco, especially during her date with him to the park. Is that fucking Ted Kaczynski? However, her grief and depression caused by Eotikin's death and the stress over preparing a proper eulogy for him at the winter formal begins to overwhelm her. So initially, Inco and Olivia decide to go for another date in town, instead of going to the formal. And it isn't until she and Inco witness the performance of a fiery dancing troupe led by
Nicola and my promised
Grandpa Alejandro
that she's inspired by the elderly leader passing on her legacy to his granddaughter, and there Olivia regains her fire and resolves to attend the winter formal and give her speech about Eotikin. However, they sadly weren't able to make it in time, and Ben lashes out at them, and Olivia feels like she failed Eotikin, which sends her on another spiral of depression, not even going to school to the point where she flunks out, failing to graduate. But after a year later, the two are finally able to get some closure with Eotikin's death, where they revisit St. Hammond and pay a visit to Eotikin's grave. And the game ends with Olivia finally giving her eulogy at his grave. And there she vows to get better. Now this ending was definitely my favorite. I felt like this ending did a great job at showing how the road to recovery isn't always a straight line, in the sense where Olivia's in a pretty bad spot emotionally after Eotikin's death, to the point where she was too depressed to attend the formal and give her eulogy to him, but she did feel a spark of hope after being inspired by the fire dancers, and made her feel like she got her drive back. But she had that fire extinguished when they arrived too late at the formal and ended up missing the speech, which has sent her on another downward spiral where she ends up dropping out of school due to her depression. But even when she's at her lowest, she's still passionate about what she does, as shown through her becoming an art streamer, and how she and Inco are still together. And when Olivia and Inco finally manage to find closure when visiting Iadakin's grave, it's implied that from that point on, she'll fully begin to heal. And that's honestly a message I love seeing in stories. I mean, that was one of the messages I tried to show with my Snootfic Bad Apple, particularly near the end. Just because you get knocked down after trying to heal doesn't mean you can't get back up again. Be like John Wick in John Wick 4, where even when that asshole knocks you down the stairs, don't give up, just keep climbing those stairs. That was probably a weird comparison, but I hope you all know what I'm trying to say. And then we have ending 4, the perfect or definitive ending of I Wani Hug That Gator. Now, well, some people may say this ending is a bit too perfect or unrealistic. It definitely has the most content and ties up the most loose ends in this ending, similarly to ending 4 of Snoot Game. But to get this ending, you have to make sure you get all the right choices that allow Inco and Olivia to fully grow. But more specifically, there's a part in the game where you have to choose the option to call out her actions when she admits to messing with Inco's submission with the art contest, because this way it reveals how Ben's former friendship with Olivia, which plays a crucial part in this ending, similarly to how you have to let Fang speak on the rooftop in Snoot Game without interrupting her. It reveals how Olivia and Ben used to be friends and exactly why they stopped being friends. But flashing forward a bit, what happens in this ending before the formal is pretty similar to what happens in the other ones. Inco and Olivia spend time together, they continue to bond, they go on some dates, and we get to see, once again, how fucking adorable Olivia can be. And like in ending 3, Inco becomes more mature and less of a consumerist. And then flash forward to the formal. Not only is Olivia wearing a beautiful dress and fully prepared to make her speech honoring Mr. Iadakin, but holy shit, Mr. Ferris can hit the gritty. Sorry about that. What I mean is Olivia prepared a beautiful painting of a fountain that she promised Iadakin she would do. And during the formal, Inco and Olivia share a dance. And I mean a real dance. She literally used her fucking tail as support so she could share a dance with her boyfriend, and it's beautiful, bros. I love it. And don't listen to what the whiny depressed weirdos on Twitter say. This moment was beautiful, bros. But of course, some drama has to ensue when Mia is, well, Mia, but more so than usual, to the point where she abuses Ben in front of Inco and Olivia, and when confronted by others, she tried to paint Ben as the abuser and exposes him in front of the whole school for using antipsychotic meds before she runs away like a pansy. And after that, Inco finds Ben alone and broken, and he's able to give him a bit of a heart-to-heart before inviting him to hang out with him and his friends for the rest of the night. And later, he becomes part of that friend group and rekindles his friendship with Olivia. And the rest of the route has some pretty nice epilogue stuff after the formal. Inco and the gang visit the Polynesian resort at Disney World. I mean, not really, but kind of. And and they have a nice little title drop and a scene where all of the supporting characters reminisce about Inco and Olivia when asked about them. And if you complete all 4 routes, or just complete ending 4, I forget what the condition to unlock the scene is, you get a really nice epilogue scene that shows Inco, Olivia, Damien, and Liz a couple of years later, all doing well for themselves with their careers. Man, I wish it was as easy as they made it seem. I graduated high school in 2018 and college in 2021, and I'm still trying to get my shit together, bros. But the game ends with another beautiful animation, with Inco proposing to Olivia. I definitely really enjoyed this ending too. I mean, yeah, some say it may be a bit too on the perfect side, but I feel like it's the most fleshed out. out of all the routes and Wani, and for good reasons too. Snoot Game ending 4 was like this as well, but all in all, it was awesome seeing how Inco and Olivia's development came full circle in this route and how it wraps up the story. And I will say too, the game is pretty long compared to Snoot Game. Like, for example, if you go in the game's files, Snoot Game has about 14 chapters with different variations depending on the route, whereas I Wani Hug That Gator has about 19 chapters, which is pretty nice. Although unfortunately, the game doesn't have any bonus chapters like Snoot Game. And the game also has built-in mod support and Steam Workshop support, allowing mod makers to easily upload their mods to Steam so people can simply download them and play them. Although be careful when installing mods because they can fuck up your game files if you want to play the base version of Wani after installing these mods. So like I was saying earlier, I love the story of Snoot Game, and the storytelling really hit me on a personal level and got me more invested in the game's characters than I ever thought a fucking scaly visual novel on a Slovenian butter churning form ever could. And now that the developers of the game made another game that's bigger than the first one, how does it hold up? Honestly, pretty well. I Wani Hug That Gator is a really enjoyable visual novel with really great art and animations and music. In terms of visuals and sound, it's definitely a big step up from Snoot Game, which is understandable since the production value was a lot higher this time since they have an actual budget, and how they were able to bring more talent to the team. However, this might be a bit of an unpopular opinion depending on where you ask, but I felt like the story and the characters were a slight step down from Snoot Game, in my opinion. Now, not to say that it's bad at all. Well, there's a lot of characters that are great, there's some characters that are just kinda there. Like, even some of the main characters don't feel as fleshed out as some of the other characters did in Snoot Game, although the two characters I really did like that stuck out with me the most were Olivia and Iadakin. And Inco too, to an extent, but I found that these two characters particularly were like the best parts of the game. But I'll get to that in a second. So, it's definitely better than Goodbye Volcano High, that's for sure, but I wouldn't say it's as good as Snoot Game in some areas. But nonetheless, I still really enjoyed it, and it was overall a solid experience. And so now, I'm gonna talk about the characters of Wani. So let's first start off with Inco, a totally new character, right? So Inco G. Nito, can you guess what that's a pun on? Is the faceless human protagonist of I Wani Hug That Gator, the same way Anon was the protagonist of Snoot Game, and the two have pretty similar circumstances too, where they arrive as the sole human in a school where they're completely out of their elements. Although in Inco's case, it's at the beginning of the school year as he moved with his parents to Volcadera Bluffs, until they decide to go on a vacation for 8 months. Wait, that's the wrong game. So unlike Anon, who wants nothing to do with anybody at the beginning of the game, just content to keep to himself and ride his way into a life of obscurity, Inco comes to the school with some pretty big ambitions of becoming a successful photographer as well as making all sorts of new friends. However, unlike Anon, who starts off as an antisocial and apathetic person, Inco is more so on the self-absorbed and clueless side, and just like in Snoot Game, like I said earlier, your choices impact the type of person he becomes. Especially if you go for the worst ending, like, holy fuck, Inco was a straight-up sociopath in ending 1. Now, he's definitely more likable than Anon from the get-go, although I found it kind of hard to figure out exactly what they were going for with his character at times, since at the beginning of the story, he's, like I said, more outgoing and more sociable than Anon, so it's kind of hard to figure out what his deal was at first. However, as the game progressed, I started to get more and more of an idea of, like, what his issues were and, like, how exactly he needs to grow. Although, personally, I didn't find him as interesting as Anon was. Like, I can definitely understand what they were trying to do in terms of Inco's character in the sense where he's presented as this guy who's a bit of a clueless kid who is a bit of a shallow understanding of everything around him and is, for, well, lack of a better word, a consumer. Especially when it's implied to some extent that because his parents are never really around due to his jobs is, when he was growing up, he never really had anybody to guide him through life, which is also part of the reason why he's so desperate for praise or recognition for his photography, like partially due to his parents' neglect, which I think is a pretty interesting parallel, compared to Olivia, who's surrounded by people who love her. But I'll get to more of that in a bit when I talk about Olivia next. But overall, I did like Inco's character growth, but I didn't find him as relatable as Anon, and I didn't find his growth as satisfying as Anon's personally, since he starts off the game already kind of a decent enough person despite his flaws, but I feel like the main growth that he receives in the good endings aren't as profound as his counterpart in Snoot Game. But it is nice to see how he develops more emotional intelligence to those around him, as well as having the backbone to stand up to Ben in Ending 3 and Mia in Ending 4, as well as becoming less naive and more mature, compared to Anon, who has the chance to break free from his apathy and become a more supportive and outgoing person who decides he wants more out of life than to just stick to himself and not be noticed. And I mean, I did find Inco, like, I do understand what they were trying to do with Inco, and I did like him as a character, but I didn't find him as relatable personally, and I feel like they could have done a little bit more, but that's just me personally. Alrighty, so now let's talk about my favorite character in I Wani Hug That Gator, the titular Gator herself, Olivia Halford. Wait, she's not an alligator? She's a baryonyx? Hold on a sec. Bunch of false advertising fucks. So when I first started Wani, one of the things I wanted to see was what kind of character Olivia would be. Now, Fang was definitely my favorite character from Snoot Game, and probably one of my favorite video game characters from this decade so far, if I'm being completely honest. But, so, Olivia definitely had some pretty big shoes to fill as a result, considering the impression Fang left on me, and so many others, and thankfully, I like to think that she did. So in Wani, we first meet Olivia when she's rushing through the tower halls at Mach 5 speed while she's fighting and chomping away at... You know what, fuck you, I consider that canon. So kind of like how in Snoot Game with Anon and Fang, Inco and Olivia's relationship starts off a bit rocky, where Damien, her best friend and godbrother, introduces Inco to their friend group, much to Olivia's dismay. But slowly, she starts to warm up to the bald human, and eventually the two fall for each other. This is sounding very familiar. Okay, but I want to explain more about my thoughts of Olivia. So, like I said, Olivia is probably my second favorite gaming character of 2024. The number one honor goes to Sir Chadsbach from the Elden Ring DLC. But Olivia as a character definitely impressed me a lot, and I found her really compelling in terms of her writings, much in the same way that I found Anon and Fang's writing to be really compelling in Snoot Game too. And one of the things you'll notice about Olivia is her being paraplegic, if that wasn't obvious, forcing her to get around in a wheelchair most of the time. Like, pay attention to my phrasing when I say most of the time, we'll come back to that area in a sec. And it's shown throughout the game she's less so bothered by her condition and more so how people treat her because of said condition. Particularly when they try to view her with pity or try to paint her as a disabled artist who managed to overcome her condition, making her feel very patronized and feel like people only give her praise because she's disabled rather than her actual merit as an artist, leaving her to frequently doubt herself and her abilities because of how people have treated her in the past, which makes her insecure to a degree, and how part of the reasons why she pushes people away, except for Iadakin and Damien, is because Like I said, she's worried people just view her with pity, which is why she acts so distant with a lot of people, even the Payne family at times. However, her struggles in this area also sadly blind her from realizing just how many people love and care about her. And unlike Inco, I personally found her story a lot more compelling and personally relatable, especially in terms of how she's treated because of her disability rather than who she is as a person and the work she can create. Now, before I elaborate further, it might be kind of a stretch to say I found her struggles with being judged for her disability relatable because, you know, I can walk. But I do suffer from Asperger's syndrome or autism spectrum disorder, whatever you want to call it. I like saying Asperger's because it's funnier. And growing up, I really struggled greatly with the way people were only nice to me because they felt sorry for me and kind of treated me like I was lesser. And if I did do something good, like kind of felt like they were mainly praising me for being able to overcome my disability. And I didn't really make a friend who treated me as a genuine equal until I was in the 7th grade. And while I did struggle a lot in elementary school, I succeeded very well in high school and college. However, like I said earlier, I did have some moments when people saw me as the special kid overcoming the odds and succeeding rather than somebody who just worked as hard as I could to get where I am. And I'll admit, it didn't bother me too much when some people said that about me, but I can understand why some others would be deeply upset over being viewed that way, which is why I found Olivia to be a very believable character. And I just love getting to know more and more about Olivia throughout the game, seeing how just dorky and adorable she can be underneath her typical dour and taciturn demeanor, as well as just how truly passionate she is about the things she likes, especially art and anime, and also the fact that she named her pet rat Guts should just tell you just how based Olivia is. And I definitely love the way she changes throughout the story depending on the player's choices, like particularly in Ending 4 when she fully breaks from that shell and becomes less prideful and insecure thanks to her believing in herself and the support of those around her, especially Inco. Or in Ending 3 where she sadly falters and deals with depression, dropping out of school and living with Inco, but she still wants to improve and truly become better, not just for Inco, but for herself too. And she does have the chance to become worse in Ending 1 and Ending 2, where she becomes a lot more caustic and lashes out at those who care about her. Most notably the Payne family, but I already said that earlier. And overall, I found Olivia to be a really well-written and compelling character as a result. She's definitely one of the few characters that really stood out to me in Wani. And now, let's talk about some of the others, shall we? Now, to be honest, one of the things I thought Wani did worse than Snoot Game were the supporting characters. Now, before I start, I do want to say there's two characters that I do like quite a bit in terms of the supporting cast, namely Damien and Iadakin. So let's start with the the motherfuckers that spit acid and shit there. So Damien is a pretty cool character. Like I said earlier, the best way I can describe him is if Nasser and Reed had a baby. Don't ask me how that's possible, just listen to what I have to say. And Damien was the result. And he has the charisma and the laid-back attitude of everybody's favorite stoner raptor, as well as serving as the brother figure to Olivia, who just wants to see her happy and get through her struggles. And they did a great job setting him up as having a good balance between the comedic relief as well as a good supporting character that manages to give Inco insight about Olivia as he learns more about her, as well as showing how he's the glue that holds people together. Like, remember how Olivia and Liz got into an argument at the restaurant? It's almost like that wouldn't happen if a certain somebody was there. Wink wink. And then there's Mr. Iadakin, the art and photography teacher of St. Hammond, and the overall mentor figure in the game. So I thought Eotikin was a pretty good and well-rounded character too. He's highly talented, dedicated to his craft, and a great teacher that genuinely cares about his students, and a good person overall. Now, what I definitely appreciate about his character is how, when compared to Principal Spears, who is mostly in teacher mode throughout the majority of the stories, and the few times he is more personable, it's usually just played off for laughs. What I like about Eotikin is his more personable moments are usually played straight and definitely adds a lot more to his character, especially during moments when he's not in class, notably when he's stuck in the school with Inco and Olivia during the storm. It definitely helps make him seem like more of a person rather than just a teacher character. It's almost like teachers are people too. And I'm sure I'm not alone when I say that his unexpected death after learning he was struggling with bone cancer for years until he, well, died. I'm sure I'm not alone when I say that really caught me off guard, especially on a personal level. And not just because he was one of the characters I like the most in Wani, but because it's a really real reminder how sometimes you'll never know what people are suffering from behind the scenes and how they may appear fine on the surface, but they're fighting a war that only they know about. And I've had this happen to two people in my life. One of the most noteworthy examples being my godfather, who was suffering from cancer a few years ago, and he lied about how bad his cancer was and said he was getting better until I reached out to him one day and found out he was in the hospice and he died. And because of that personal experience with having someone you know keep such a terrible thing they're dealing with a secret, that's part of the reason why elements like this in Wani really hit me on a personal level. Eotikin deserved better, man. Fuck. And I mean, there's a few other characters that are okay, but kind of undercooked, like Liz, to be honest, who's mainly just Naomi, but without the manipulative qualities. I did find the argument at the restaurant did give a little more depth to her character, as well as why she's a little bit distant with Olivia. And then there's Ben, who feels a bit inconsistent, for lack of a better way to describe it. Like, I feel like at the beginning of the game, they made it seem like he was gonna have more presence, almost the same kind of presence that someone like Damien or Liz or Eotikin have, but he doesn't really have as much screen time as them until like near the end of the game. And I do wish the reveal that he was struggling with mental illness was implemented a little bit differently. Like, I thought it could have worked really well, especially considering how he can be considered the foil to Olivia in the sense where she's struggling with a physical condition that others can see clear as day, compared to Ben who's struggling with a mental condition that only he truly knows about, along with the people he tells. But I feel like the execution of it was a little bit half-baked, in my opinion, when it's only touched upon briefly in Ending 4. Like, I feel like something like that should have been hinted at a little bit more, personally. But now, let's talk about the most controversial character of the game, Vinny, for having the most based opinion ever shown in a video game. Nah, I'm just kidding, it's Mia. Now, I know a lot of people have been shitting on Mia's character, mainly because she's irredeemably bad or one-dimensional. Well, I call those people Redditors, because not every antagonist needs to be super tragic or have a deep backstory. Like, okay, I kid, kind of. But similarly to Trish, Mia is meant to be utterly dislikable. She's an asshole who constantly antagonizes Inco and Olivia and manages to evade almost every ounce of karma that comes her way. Although in Snoot Game, Trish's main reasons for being such a terrible person was out of a misguided attempt to help Fang, whereas Mia is just a piece of shit through and through. However, I will criticize how she was handled in Ending 4, in terms of certain questions about her character that were left unanswered, mainly like, what were the skeletons in her closet that Ben mentioned? Or maybe like how she kind of mentioned that she's only a terrible person because she had to be, like in Ending 4, but it's never really elaborated on why she feels like she has to be such a terrible person. And I kind of wish either that it was explained or just have her written as an asshole for the sake of being an asshole. Because at the end of the day, the reality is that some people are just rotten to the core. But I will give the writers props for going this route because, fuck, I don't think I've ever hated a character in a video game this much since Micah from Red Dead Redemption 2, so honestly good shit. But overall, while there are some pretty good characters in Wani, I do feel like it fell a little bit flat in comparison to Snoot Game in this regard. And this is why I feel like having bonus chapters could have come in handy, especially with the supporting cast. And so now I kind of want to talk about how it compares to Snoot Game. And so obviously what drew me to playing I Wani Hug That Gator in the first place was my love for Snoot Game. A game that I never would have expected to impact me as much as it did. Like, hell, I've made several videos about Snoot Game, and even worked on a fucking fanfiction for Snoot Game for about 2 years, that I'm also making into a mod with the help of others. And so when I learned that the creators of Snoot Game were making another VN with a similar setting, of course I was interested. And I Wani Hug That Gator managed to do a lot of things better than Snoot Game, if I'm being honest. Like, the soundtrack was definitely improvement, especially since a lot of the songs were actually created by Caveman on this time around. And the art was a lot better, as well as the general choreography, definitely making the game feel more alive. And like I said before, this game had a lot more people working on it, and they even had fucking animations too, which were honestly really enjoyable to see, and they definitely surprised me, especially when Mia turned into the Quagmire toilet. I'm kidding. Especially the one where Olivia manages to stand herself up and dance with Inco at prom. Fuck, man, that scene really melted my heart. And so in terms of the production or artistic aspect of things, I will say that I Wani Hug That Gator is a pretty big improvement over that. However, I must admit that I still prefer Snoot Game's story and characters more. Although I think this also comes more down to personal preference, especially considering the key themes of Snoot Game being empathy and deciding what person you want to be really left an emotional impact on me during a time in my life where I needed it the most. And I genuinely saw myself in Anon and Fang, as well as the struggles they faced. A lot of them feeling pretty familiar to some of the things I've dealt with in my life. Not to say that Wani wasn't relatable or compelling at all, because it certainly was in a lot of areas, but I feel like Snoot Game manages to target a specific crowd better, whereas Wani's appeal is meant to be more widespread, and because of that specific target demographic, I feel like that's why Snoot Game stuck out with me more. And although, even though I have an easier time recommending I Wani Hug That Gator than Snoot Game, because the latter of which is definitely a lot edgier and has more controversial aspects to it, whereas Wani is a lot cleaner of a game to recommend. But all in all, I still really enjoyed Wani, and I highly recommend playing it if you have the chance. Especially if you like Snoot Game, or if you just like visual novels like this in general. The developers made a really damn good job at making the game. However, unlike Snoot Game, you will have to buy the game either through Steam or itch.io to play it, so do keep that in mind. But yeah, that pretty much sums out how I felt about I Wani Hug That Gator. Like I said, I wanted to make this review video a lot earlier, but when I finished the GVH review video around the same time Wani came out, I was pretty burnt out with working on long-ass videos, but I'm able to do it now, and I hope you guys enjoyed this review video. But yeah, please comment down below your thoughts on Wani, whether or not you enjoyed it, how it impacted you, or how you feel it compares to Snoot Game. I'm definitely curious to see what you guys have to say. But that about wraps things up. I'll see you guys next time with some more content, including Snoot Game content. But until next time, I love you all. Umbruhh, out.